Happy Monday. Let's couldn't figure out how to get my hand in there. Let's start seated. I think seated sounds rad. Ah, just settling in, letting your eyes close, letting your breath regulate to what feels best for you. If you can feel the shoulders soften and relax, the jaw soften, tongue release from the top of the mouth if it's there. Allow yourself to run through that same checklist. Shoulders soften, jaw softens, tongue softens, forehead softens, eyes soften. And we'll give ourselves 16 more seconds here. Maybe even continuously running through that checklist, maybe letting that checklist go, just depending on what benefits you. And when it feels right, allowing the eyes to open if they're closed. Thinking about keeping the hips and the shoulders stacked. Turn your head over towards the right. Really thinking about that hip shoulder stack. And then bring the head back to neutral, and then we'll do the same thing to the left. And we'll come back to neutral. Now we're going to think about keeping the hip shoulder stack and really think about the shoulder girdle staying neutral, and try to take your right ear over towards your right shoulder. Just a nice little elongation along the left side of the neck. And we'll come back to neutral, and then over to that second side, the left side. Again, really thinking about shoulders staying neutral. And we'll come back to that neutral space. And let's take our gaze over towards the left. And back to neutral. And over towards the right. And back to neutral. Tuck the chin to the sternum. And then squeeze the shoulder blades straight back towards the back of the room. Keep the shoulder blades squeezed. Turn the palms down if they're not already. Shoulder blades stay squeezed, and we'll lift the chin towards the ceiling. And as that happens, really think about the front of the throat spacing out. And we'll come back to neutral. A lot of head neck space. Let's take that and transition to hands and knees tabletop. As we do so, utilize that extra level of awareness around the head to help set the entirety of the spine, and see if, as you're doing that, if the head can kind of cue the core, so that head positioning, the creation of neutral cervical spine, activates the musculature, especially the musculature in the abdominals, but especially around the diaphragm. And let's try to keep that anterior musculature activation as we curl our toes and roll ourselves back into down dog. And as you get back into that space, play with your chin position. So maybe we turn the gaze over towards the left and the right, and tuck the chin and lift the chin. Just a little exploration of that head and neck space while we have the posterior chain pretty darn activated in down dog. And then let's come down to hands and knees, flip the tops of the feet, and sink back into child's pose. And as you settle into that child's pose, let the hamstrings kind of receive the pressure. I guess the calves receive back. The lower half of the leg received the pressure from the upper half of the leg is probably a more fair way to state that. Where that pressure manifests really depend upon how open the hips are. But think about being leg heavy and then reposition, readjust your cervical spine so that the head and neck feel long and integrated. And then fingertips connect with the mat in front of us. We'll pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. Bring the right knee like 4 to 6 inches forward and more towards the middle of the mat. And then the right hand's going to go kind of 4 to 6 inches forward and towards the middle of the mat. Left foot's going to kick back and left heel's going to ground. And we're just going to open our left hand into a modified side plank. Rough verticalness of the femur. And then left hand comes down, left heel lifts up. We'll return back to tabletop, curl our toes, and lift ourselves back into down dog. Think about the hips pressing and extending back into full depth. Let's come down to hands and knees. Tabletop, we'll take this to the second side. So left knee is going to come slightly forward, left hand forward and towards the middle of the mat. Right foot kicks back, right heel grounds, right hand elevates into this side plank. Good, strong modification here, pressing into that lateral edge of your right foot and feeling connected in the left hand. When you feel balanced left to right, right hand comes down. Right heel lifts up. We re-find our way to tabletop, curl our toes, lift our seat, and roll back into down dog. As you're getting back into this down dog, just kind of notice how the middle of the body feels, how the shoulder girdle feels, how the head neck integration feels. And then let's walk ourselves forward to forward fold. And from your forward fold, inhale into half lift.
And then exhale and sink and settle fully back into your fold space. And as you sink and settle into that fold space, pay attention to where the restrictiveness and the shape is coming from. See what you can do to soften any hamstring limitation, any high calf limitation. And then let's drift our awareness to our sacrum, and we'll roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, making our way up into mountain and bringing our hands together at heart center. Let the eyes close here. And as the eyes close, give yourself a glute squeeze to help stabilize the lower half of the body. And then see if it's possible for you, right? If it's possible for you to keep the eyes closed as you turn your head over towards the right, thinking about the shoulders staying nice and neutral. And then head comes back to neutral. Glute stays squeezed, so we have that midline stability. And we'll take the head over towards the left. Eyes closed if that's possible. If not, let the eyes open. And we'll come back to neutral. Sweep the arms up and overhead. And exhale the hands back to heart center. Slide your left foot straight back into lunge. And then ground your left heel and roll open into warrior two. Energize down into that front leg so that you are really strong on the front side of the shape. And then bring your right forearm onto your right thigh and let the left hand reach forward, palm down. Think about extending straight out from your shoulder, and then think about positioning your head so that it's running parallel with that arm. And then we'll draw ourselves back up into warrior two. Feel that extra little bit of space we've created around the medial line. And then left heel spins up. We're into crescent. Hands drop to heart center, and we'll utilize that to help us return to the front of the mat. Recreate balance and stability here, maybe even that glute squeeze that helps settle us. And then the right foot slides straight back. We land, we'll ground the right heel and roll ourselves open into warrior two. Just checking in with the space that we have here. Eventually, left forearm comes to left thigh. Right hand reaches towards the upper corner of the front of our room is probably a good way to describe that. And then we're trying to feel our head running parallel with that right bicep. Right hand draws us back up into warrior two, and we settle into that extra space in the middle of the body. And then the right heel spins up and we're in crescent once again. And then we'll drop the hands to heart center as we make our way back to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead and exhale through forward fold. Letting your body just once again settle into the depth of that forward fold. And then inhale into half lift. And we'll exhale back into fold, plant our hands, walk back into down dog. From down dog, create that depth, create that energy, create that space within the shape. And let's come down to hands and knees, tabletop, and we'll sink our way back and into child's pose. So we opened up a lot of anterior hip space, medial line space, and that brings some room in that anterior hip crease. So as you're here, think about compare and contrast to the first time we made it into this shape. And then also think about how we can settle as we breathe deeper into the space. So there's this isolated fishing village in Newfoundland. Pretty typical Newfoundland fishing village. Has a pretty small population. Yeah, we would think of it as a very small population, a couple hundred people max. And like Newfoundlanders for their entirety of their existence, the main focus of the community is fishing, mostly cod in this area. Let's give ourselves just 15 more seconds here. And when you're ready, when it feels appropriate, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, get those hands to splay out as wide as you can get them. And then with that energy in the hands, curl your toes, lift your seat, roll yourself back into the down dog. And then think about that anterior hip crease pulling back. Like that's the guiding force for length and extension here. Really using the front of the hips to create space and to utilize that space to create spinal length. And then let's walk our way to the front of the mat. Coming into our fold here, balance the weight distribution across the toe mounds and heels. Inhale into half lift. And exhale back and into fold. Let the hamstrings really receive the release there. Drift your awareness to your sacrum and let's roll ourselves up vertebrae by vertebrae, coming into our top space. And from that top space, bring your hands together at heart center. And with the hands at heart center, let's splay the fingers out as wide as you can. Think about making your hands just as big as they can possibly be. And then extend those arms straight out in front of you. So fingers splayed out wide, pushing and extending, squeeze the shoulders back, and then sink your way into your version of chair. Feel how hard this is. And then just release, hands come together at heart center. Relax. Try to get the shoulders to relax. Actually, let's interlace the fingers so you don't have to have any pressure. So the interlace here, is just so that we don't have to hold the hands together, so that they can just kind of rest here. And then sink your seat back into chair and feel how much easier it is to create the depth, right? So we deactivate the shoulders. We take the burden of the shape out of the shoulders, and it's pretty darn easy. And then we'll rise right back up. Let's take the fingers stacked once again and splay the fingers out wide. So pressing against the palms, stacking out wide. Arms reach out in front of us. Keep that finger spacing and slide your right foot straight back and into lunge. And then inhale and start to lift those arms up and overhead. So you may not be able to get there without cheating the elbows. If you don't get there, just go to where the shoulders feel is okay for now. And then relax the hands to heart center. Interlace the fingers and let's slide our way forward to the front of the mat. Try to get the shoulder musculature to relax again, right? Huge asks of the shoulders here. Really trying to get ease to come back in this kind of interspace. And then let's splay the fingers out wide, press the palms together, extend the arms out in front of us, create that big wide space. Left foot slides back, and we'll sweep the arms up to what is possible for our shoulders. Nice little opportunity to check on the left and right side symmetry and what is available to you. And then we'll drop the hands to heart center, give that little finger interlace, and we will slide to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into half lift. And exhale back into fold. Slide your left foot straight back into lunge. Plant your left hand right underneath your left shoulder and reach your right hand towards the front of the room, palm down. Think about the right arm extending straight out from the shoulder and really distancing the right fingertips from the left heel. Then drop your right hand to the mat and slide your left foot forward. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Slide that right foot straight back. Right hand plants underneath the right shoulder. Left hand extends straight out in front of us. Push back through that right heel. Reach through those left fingertips. Create space here in the middle of the body. And then left hand comes down to the mat. Right foot steps forward into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Settle into that fold space. Plant your hands and let's walk our way into plank. Think about creating the stability of plank and then slowly, gently, delicately lower yourself down to your belly. And let's anchor our forehead on the mat. And slide our hands onto our sacrum. So if the palms land and they're up, wonderful. If you can interlace the fingers, wonderful. But we want the hands to be in a position where the shoulders are receiving space, not where the shoulders are having to cheat and change position. So palm up, maybe even hands at the side, palms towards one another. But any of those three shapes, either clasp, palms up, or on the hips facing towards one another. Flex into the quads so the kneecaps lift. And then press down into the tops of the feet. And then push your hands towards the heels. So no matter where they are, we're pushing towards the heels. And what we're trying to create here is some shoulder activation. So anchored at the head, anchored at the feet, shoulders distancing, creating space. And then let's relax. We'll slide our hands underneath our forehead for a little crocodile pose, and we'll just let the shoulders relax. It's a pretty long sequence of shoulder intensive stuff. So really think about shoulders relaxing as you find your way into crocodile pose. Over the last couple of years, this little community in Newfoundland has been having problems with this particular Viking. This Viking has this huge kind of warship, and he keeps coming into town with this huge ship, and he keeps attacking the village, taking their resources, taking their gold, taking their cod, taking their crabs. And he seems to do this at random intervals whenever he wants. And they just haven't been able to stop him. Let's give ourselves 30 more seconds here. Really just 30 seconds of focused release of that shoulder tissue. Really want our shoulders to be at ease. Last 5 seconds here.
And then when it feels appropriate, let's slide our hands back underneath our shoulders. We'll press ourselves up to hands and knees tabletop. From hands and knees tabletop, we'll curl our toes, lift our seat, find our way back into down dog, get all the way back into that shape. Drive the energy from your fingerprints all the way through your hips. And let's walk our way to the front of the mat. We'll find our way into fold, inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale your hands to heart center. Land here, really anchor here. Feel the glutes activate. And let's slide our left foot straight back and into lunge. Sweep the arms up, fully express your crescent. And then float the hands down to the mat. Left hand plants, right hand takes us into the twist. Right hand plants. Let's take the right hand to the medial edge, so big toe edge of the right foot, and ground your left foot for side angle. And then anchor yourself down into that right arm. Really think about creating stability there. And we're gonna slide this right foot back into side plank. Big challenge, big ask. And then maybe we even extend that left arm straight out towards the front of the room. And then left hand comes down, right hand comes back to its side of the mat. Let's make our way back into down dog. Set that space. Feel the asymmetry around the shoulders. And then we'll eventually walk our way forward and into fold. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Grab opposite elbows and just rock a little side to side. And then we'll bring our body back into neutral, sweep or roll ourselves all the way up. Bring our hands together at heart center. Land here. Glutes squeeze. Right foot slides back into lunge. Sweep the arms to fully express crescent. Float the hands down to the mat. Right hand plants, left hand lifts us into the twist. Left hand comes down. Left hand comes to that medial edge, big toe edge of the left foot. Right heel grounds, right hand lifts us up and into side angle. Now keep in mind you're likely on your less dominant side, and this transition's pretty big. So if it feels more appropriate to go to the half transition, find your way onto the knee, feel free. If you feel like stepping all the way back into that full side angle, full side plank, excuse me, let that happen. And then maybe the right arm reaches towards the front of the room. Right hand comes down, left hand makes its way back to its side of the mat. Get all the way back into that space. Really feel that lateral edge space that you've created as you get back into this down dog. And then let's walk our way forward to the front of the mat. Inhale into half lift. Exhale back into fold. Grab opposite elbows, rock a little side to side. Let the spine release. Created some symmetry here. We want to use that symmetry to create space. And then eventually torso and head come back to neutral. Drift our awareness to our sacrum, and we'll choose to sweep or roll all the way up. Hands coming together at heart center and mountain.
Let's drop so settle here, drop the shoulders down away from the ears, and then bring some engagement into the core, and then drop your hands behind you. And we kind of have a similar tact to what we did on our belly. So fingers can interlace, palms can be away from us, or hands can be on the side towards one another, whatever feels the most appropriate for your shoulders. And draw the shoulders straight back now. So we get a little bit more retraction here. Good, strong belly activity. And then slide your right foot straight back and into lunge. Okay, so we have a lot of shoulder hold. Lift the chin towards the ceiling if that is within your practice. Squeeze those shoulders back into that extra space. And then with the chin still lifted, release the hands and sweep the arms up and sink into the extra depth that has become available into the hips. Then we drop the hands to heart center and return to the front of the mat. Relax the shoulders down away from the ears. Drop the hands. Slide the hands behind us, palms away or to the lateral edge. Your choice, interlacing palms away or to the lateral edge. And give yourself that shoulder retraction. There may be more room now since we've already gone through this one time. And then we'll slide the left foot straight back and into lunge. Squeeze back into that space. Think about creating that room. Then we'll lift the chin. Feel all of that space happen. As you lift the chin, there's a little more room for the shoulders to retract. Then we sweep the arms up and sink into the extra hip space that is released. And then drop the hands to heart center and step to the front of the mat. Sweep the arms up and overhead. Exhale through forward fold. Inhale into lift. And exhale back into fold. Plant your hands and walk back into down dog. Drive the depth back into down dog. Use that extra shoulder space we've created. When you can no longer create space, come down to hands and knees and we'll sink back into child's pose. This will be the last time we get access to child's pose, so really settle into what feels beneficial here. And we'll give ourselves 30 seconds just to settle in. And then when it feels appropriate, let's pull ourselves forward to hands and knees tabletop. And from hands and knees tabletop, we're going to extend our legs out in front of us. Into staff. From staff, let's pull the belly button back and then take ourselves forward into a traditional seated forward fold. The knees can bend as much as feels appropriate here. So don't short yourself that opportunity to bend your knees. And so it's hard to overstate the amount of fear that this community has built up around this Viking Raider. It seems like anytime anyone in the community sees anything on the horizon, a panic runs and races through the community. And yet, no matter what defenses they attempt to create, this Viking seems to elude whatever obstacles they put in front of him. No matter when they diligently watch, how they diligently prepare, he always seems to have an answer for it. And this Viking very quickly becomes the most hated person in this community. Let's give ourselves 30 more seconds here in this first seated fold. Last 10 seconds here. We'll walk ourselves back up and into staff. Let's bring the bottoms of the feet together. Let the knees kick out wide. And clasp over the toe mounds if that's accessible. If not, the ankles will or shins will be a suitable place to grab. If we have the capacity to get the elbows in front of the shins, let's do that. If not, you can tuck them in, capturing that hamstring space. And then let's just use a little lateral rock here, lateral torso movement to help us get deeper and deeper into our fold space. So that this movement becomes the creator of room. Medial line here, wrapping into that high hamstring, becomes our limiting musculature. And so see if you can relax in and then eventually settle into a little butterfly fold. Let's just give ourselves 30 more seconds here. And eventually, when it feels appropriate, we'll bring ourselves out of that space, extend our legs out in front of us, and then slowly lower ourselves onto our spine to receive all the work we've done here. A lot of shoulder work, right? A lot of kind of sneaky hip work related to the shoulders. And then we did that big, long sequence of forward folds into the flexion of the spine. Now just bringing yourself into this neutral landing. And just breathe into that space you've created.
And so the entirety of the town is abuzz when one morning, at the very earliest light of dawn, the lookout alerts the community to this Viking raider ship being in the harbor. And the ship itself looks like it's in incredibly bad shape. That area around Newfoundland is known for some pretty rough seas. When it feels right within you, let's bring our knees into a bent position so the kneecaps can point towards the ceiling, and then anchor your seat, your kind of hip girdle sacrum to the mat, but lift your knees. So maybe even less of a compression contraction than normal, just a lifting so that you can feel a little more neutral in the lumbar. And then maybe you let your hands come onto the knees if that feels accessible. And then if we do have the hands on the knees, maybe just a little bit of movement there. If you don't have the hands on the knees, you could even go just heels lifted and kind of pedal up and down, alternating heel lifts. So just listening to what's appropriate for your body. And then eventually letting the feet come back down to the mat. And let's add a little dynamic sway. So an opportunity for some exploration here. Really think about the tempo and the pace of the movement, along with the depth of the movement, all under your control. And so all being prioritized for the maximum benefit for you. Moving to the maximum benefit of your body at the tempo that maximally benefits you, at the depth of rotation that maximally benefits you. And so a bunch of the armed men go down to this Viking ship. And they find inside this Viking raider who has been terrorizing them, who has become the most hated person in this community. And they apprehend him. And they bring him to a little local jail. It's a one-cell jail. It's in this big kind of like governmental building. They have one police officer, what we might think of as a police officer there. The next time the knees fall over towards the left, let's let them settle there. Let's let them stay there. Again, think about the depth control. So you can move that right leg, the top knee, forward for more rotation. You can also pull that back for less rotation. You could also keep the right knee pointed up towards the ceiling, let the left knee open for even less spinal rotation, but still get the benefit of the hip opening. So make sure you position yourself here in a way where you are receiving the maximum benefit. And so this single law enforcement officer locks this Viking in this prison cell. But the reality is, looking at this new prisoner, it's pretty apparent he's very unlikely to live very long. And so this police officer kind of ushers everyone out of the building. He locks all the doors and he opens the prison cell and he goes in and he starts tending to the wounds of this Viking. And he starts making him these traditional Newfoundland healing stews. And he starts feeding this Viking these healing stews, tending to his wounds, changing the wound treatments. And there are times when it doesn't seem like the Viking's going to make it, but he does. Over time, he starts getting a little bit better. All the while, the community is constantly asking for updates on when this Viking is going to be officially deceased. And this law enforcement officer keeps kind of saying the same thing, this the very tenuous situation. He is very unhealthy, he's very unwell, he's very injured. And I will keep you updated. And that's the same update that he offers for weeks. And the community is starting to grow more and more restless, more and more agitated as they want to know what they're going to do when they're going to be rid of this Viking raider. When it feels right for you, as it feels appropriate for you, let's bring our knees back to neutral. Pause here, maybe give yourself a little bridge, a little hip reset. And then eventually anchoring down and letting the knees fall over to the second side, the right side. And so while the community outside of this little jail area is becoming more and more agitated, inside things are starting to take a different tone. This Viking raider is getting healthier, he's getting stronger, he's starting to connect more with the law enforcement official. The two of them are going through and they're cleaning together the cell, and then eventually this police officer type kind of opens the cell door and lets the Viking kind of roam freely around the jail. It's not much bigger than the room we're in here, but it gives him a little more space, and he starts cleaning up the kitchen area. And these two start to develop a little bit of a friendship. And so pretty frequently they'll play cards together. There's not much else that this Viking is able to do. One night they're playing cards by candlelight. It's the first time they've done that. And the community, it gets very dark very early in Newfoundland in the winter. The community is able to see in because of the candlelight, and they see this jailer, this prisoner, and his there law enforcement official kind of hanging out, enjoying themselves together, playing cards. And there is a huge uproar where the entirety of the community demands an update on this prisoner's status and when he will be executed if he's not going to perish on his own. when it feels appropriate for you, as it feels appropriate for you. Let's bring our knees back to neutral. And as the knees come back to neutral, let's settle in here, ask ourselves if we need a reset, if we need a bridge, if there's anything else that would be advantageous for our body or for our practice before we find our way into a shape for Shavasana. And so with a brewing riot on his hands, this police officer figure comes out, he speaks to these members of the community. Remember, these are all people who are very tight-knit. There's only a couple hundred people here. He speaks to the group. And he says, tomorrow, I want you all to come here at noon and we'll discuss this matter. And so people leave. The riot is avoided, but tempers are quite high. And just settling into your state of physical stillness here. And so the next day at noon, this law enforcement official shows up just like he said he would. And he starts a speech. Because, for many years now, we have been terrorized by this Viking and his raiding. And for many years, I have hated this person. I have feared this person that I didn't know. And then he calls the Viking out on stage. And he says, I'd like everyone to meet our new Viking friend. And he shakes his hand, and the crowd goes into this uproar. And they start screaming about hanging him. The law enforcement official says, that's not what we're going to do. And someone kind of sarcastically shouts out, what are we going to offer him? Compassion. And the law enforcement official says, that's exactly what we're going to do. And that's what I've done. I've been tending to this man's wounds. I've been feeding him. I've been taking care of him. And all of the anger, all of the fear that I had been holding, that had been gripping me, let go. We'll start to bring some movement to our fingers and our toes, into our wrists and our ankles. And so this Viking was released into this community, up into the elbows and the knees. And the Newfoundlanders were apprehensive. But over time, this Viking taught this community how to build bigger boats. They became more and more successful fishing cod because of this Viking's innovations, moving into our shoulders, our hips, our neck, our head, jaw, eyes, tongue. Eventually, we'll utilize the movement throughout our body to transition from the shapes we are in and return back to a seat. And in this seated space, spine gets tall, breath gets fluid, eyes close. And so over the course of time, this Viking became a cherished figure within this Newfoundland community, and the community itself prospered because of it. With our next inhale, let's bring our hands together, heart center. Over the course of the next 7 days, can you remind yourself that compassion is a liberating emotion? And that by expressing it, sometimes to those who may not seem like they deserve it, we can not only change ourselves, but our community, and see how that impacts your experience. Thank you so much for being a part of this evening's practice and for being you. Namaste. Happy Monday, guys. Appreciate the heck out of you. I will be back on Sunday for a recharge, Christmas Eve, if you want to hang out with me. If not, have a beautiful holiday. Love the heck out of you. Appreciate the heck out of you. See you soon. Mwah.